Good day. I'm Martin Gagel with Market Radius Research. We've got CEO Arnoud Busmann of Minehub joining us. Minehub is a developer of supply chain management, trade finance, ESG tracking, assay exchange software for the natural resources industry. It's been a while since we've talked to Arnoud, and he's here to give us a corporate update. But please remember, this is neither a recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. Arnoud, you've been busy over the last 6 months. You've announced a deal with Sumitomo, $2.5 million financing, just recently a deal with Capstone, and generally some corporate update here. So why don't you tell us, give us a brief overview on what's been going on?
Yeah, thanks, Martin. It has been busy. I think we haven't been that much in the press in the last year, but that doesn't mean that we haven't been doing very exciting things, right? So they're all coming to fruition now. So Sumitomo, of course, signing Sumitomo was a major milestone last year. Getting a financing done in November in these markets always has been interesting, but we managed to not just get the money in that we wanted, we also managed to upsize the round and remove some of the warrants to make it more attractive for the existing shareholders as well, right? So in terms of our progress over the last year, a key theme is probably what we've been doing in the copper market. We've seen a couple of things being visible in the press, work that we were doing with BHP, with Minmetals, and with Zijin in the past, but what hasn't been as visible as who we have been engaging with in the last year. So, and I put some stats in the update. We're a platform company, right? And taking a platform to market, driving standardization requires achieving a certain level of critical mass, and that means starting to engage with a lot of the players in the industry. Now, in copper, when we started running the maths and who we're actually in discussions with, we realized that we work with companies that represent more than 50% of the global copper mining production, and that's significant. I'm not saying that they're all signed contracts, but it's those are all in our orbit, and some of them are running active pilots with. We are running active pilots with. Some of them are commercially contracted, like BHP and Sumitomo. The other aspect of that is that if you look at where how copper moves, a lot of it comes from Chile, so we're very active there. But then most of it goes ultimately to China and to Japan, the copper concentrates. And we are engaged with more than 2/3 of the smelter and refiner capacity in China and Japan, which is interesting for a Western company to be that active in the marketing, get that level of support.
You're involved with 2/3, so 2/3 of the market is in active discussions with you. That's what you're saying. You're not signed up clients yet, but they're in the funnel, and hopefully something will. But clearly, like Sumitomo is, and that's obviously one of the major players in the world.
Absolutely, and we're running, and of course, most of the Japanese smelters are their customers. They procure a lot of copper from all over the world, so it's those are absolutely critical players. What excites me is that we are able to work with those companies, and they're not coming to us because we have to force them to talk to us. Now they're coming to Minehub to start because of the value that we can bring to the market and to the ecosystem.
When you talk as a platform company, it seems to have such a potential network effect where the more players you have on it, it's just going to draw more people onto it, like a Facebook of so forth, but with commodities trading, where if everyone's there, you got to put the platform on to connect, so to facilitate your trade as you go into the market.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the virtuous cycle that we're kicking off. And the more, with any standard, particularly those with network effects, the more companies are adopting it, the more valuable it gets for everybody, and the more it attracts, right? And that we see that virtuous cycle really getting into gear now.
Yeah. All right. And if you could explain this a bit more, the assay tracking, the assay lab tracking, the significance and the importance of that, if you could, and I guess you're working with a company called ALS.
Yeah, the two are related, but also separate. Right? So assay exchange, and this is for probably not everybody's familiar with it, but if you sell concentrate, be it copper, lead, or zinc, there's always a certain level of gold and silver content in the concentrate that has, and the percentage of which has a high impact on the final pricing. So it's important that you get that number right. And every concentrate shipment involves a ritual called the assay exchange, where both parties compare assays and negotiate a final assay composition, sometimes with the support of independent umpires that need to rule on certain differences that have been identified. It's a very painful process, the current way of working, because companies exchange their spreadsheets, then they do comparisons, and they have to check and double check, etc., because the operational risk is high. If you make an error, it can lead to significant financial losses. For instance, that you're not charging enough for the gold content, run into legal disputes between the companies. Your reputation could be at stake because if you're seen as misrepresenting, let's say, the content of your concentrate, and a lot of operational rework, because if there's an error, you need to fix it with all the impacts on the accounting systems, etc. And the current way it's being done is via spreadsheets. We have been working with our partners, and that's been in the press as well, with Sumitomo, with BHP, with Minmetals and Zijin, to see whether we can streamline and automate the high-risk aspects of that process, and to create a user experience that is at least 10 times as good as it's now. And we are succeeding in that. The beauty of that is that the assay exchange process becomes streamlined and a gravitational point for the industry to converge on Minehub and agree to perform their assay exchange on Minehub because of the benefits that it brings, right? And then we get more users, etc. Now, key ecosystem partners for the assay exchange or any commodity shipments are labs that analyze the goods that are inspect the goods that are being transacted or shipped, do a laboratory analysis to understand the composition, and then some of those labs are also umpires. Currently, the way those labs and umpires communicate with the companies is all via email, and they're routed into a company where an operator gets an email from, let's say, ALS, opens up that email, picks up the PDF with the lab results, keys it into SAP, probably keys it into another system, and keys it into Excel to perform the assay exchange. What we intend to do with Minehub is to route that data directly from the labs into Minehub platform. So the operator doesn't really have to touch that and only process the information, use it rather than process it. To achieve that, we're starting to work with all the major labs that are out there. The first one that we really gain traction with is ALS, and there's some more in the pipeline that will join as well to create a fully digital experience for our customers and their customers.
I'm curious, when you reach out to the assay labs, are you sort of phoning them up and say, hey, this is Arnoud from Minehub, or is it like Sumitomo saying, hey, to connect you or whichever company, here, go talk to these guys? So you're given an introduction with sort of an explanation of the context to it. You're not just some other guy phoning up.
It's a mix of both. I'd like to believe that our reputation or our brand is getting some recognition, and that we are not an unknown to the labs. And so when we phone up, it's not completely out of the blue. Some of the labs we've already engaged with a few years ago, but sometimes indeed an introduction is helpful and can speed things. Absolutely.
And you also are involved in sort of the ESG world here, where carbon credits and so forth, it's a whole new kind of currency in the world, and it needs accounting and keeping track of and how it gets passed on and so forth. So could you talk a little bit about your role in that world?
Absolutely. We look at ESG as from two different angles. One of them, you've got the more qualitative angle where you basically have to be compliant with and provide evidence of compliance with quite binary requirements, like have you got your human rights practices in order? What about your tailings management? Do you have a copper mark, for instance? Are you coming from a certain jurisdiction? It's all quite qualitative. And then there's the quantitative aspect associated with emissions accounting, where we help, where companies need to accurately account, particularly for their Scope 3 emissions, which are the emissions that are being generated by their supply chain partners, being their customers and their suppliers, which often can be up to 90% of the emissions footprint of a company. Both of them are difficult to do, particularly in longer supply chains. Look at I read some analysis that there's an automotive company has like 18,000 suppliers, not tier 1, but tier 2 plus, providing all kinds of metals, all kinds of parts, etc. They go into the vehicle. Now, if you want to calculate the emissions content of materials come from 18,000 different providers, that's quite a lot of work. If you want to make sure that each one of those suppliers, tier 3, tier 4, all the way up to the mine, is compliant with policies that are sometimes enforced by regulators, that's also a lot of work. That needs accounting systems, and MHUB is exactly that. It's an accounting system at a supply chain level to keep track of that and to help streamline that information. One way to look at it, Martin, is if you think about a ton of copper nowadays, it's much less about just having the physical metal. It's a lot more about the information about the ton of copper from an operational perspective. Where is it? Where's the shipment? What's the ETA? What are the specifications, etc. From an ESG perspective, you want to know where is it coming from? What's the emissions content? What certifications does it have, etc. All those aspects, the information about the material becomes very important. And this is exactly what MHUB does. It enables companies to help construct that information, automate the construction of that information about the materials, and to then streamline compliance.
Yeah, and then you have to sort of take the data, suck it into your system, and then it's going to get passed on to people further down the supply chain. So you have to have the links to push it further on so that the clients and the clients' clients can use that as well, right?
Exactly. And we provide tools that help companies to collaborate on creating and using the data, whether it's the physical trade, whether it's the assay exchange, whether it's for trade finance, whether it's for ESG compliance, bringing third-party auditors in to certify it on our platform. That's all those aspects are the solutions that we provide.
And how big, like a lot of companies are getting more involved with the ESG and the carbon credits and all the different around that. But is it at this point highly regulated, or is it more just sort of the market is kind of forcing you to do it? And if it's on the regulatory side, like does your system help sort of on the regulatory compliance so you can prove to whichever regulators in whichever regions as well? Like you're obviously a global, you service global supply chains that cross into lots of regulatory jurisdictions. So you have to, I guess you can help with that process.
Absolutely. I mean, for a company to be compliant, it's not enough to use our system, right? For a company to be compliant, it needs to change its practices, but it also makes sure its sourcing, responsible sourcing policies are in order, that it has a good grip on its internal emissions calculations. All those aspects are important from a company operations perspective. But once you start selling your product, you've got a whole new range of stakeholders now. And yes, they used to be quite voluntary. There used to be maybe a bit of marketing to differentiate your product in terms of where it comes from. What we're seeing now is that we have jurisdictions adopting regulations with teeth. If I think about the slightly misnamed Inflation Reduction Act in the US, that's going to define where minerals I think there's about 20 critical minerals have been identified, where they're going to be sourced from. Like 40% needs to come, I think already next year, 40% needs to come from the US or from countries that have a free trade agreement with the US. In the EU, 2025, I believe it's going to be mandatory to comply with you need to report on your sustainability just as much as you need to report on your accounting. Now that includes traceability in supply chain, includes carbon, right? That is going to be regulated. We see in copper that the LME will no longer accept brands that are not compliant with responsible sourcing requirements. So by the end of this year, brands need to be compliant, otherwise they might be delisted. And if you can't put your metal on warrant, it makes it very difficult to attract financing and to hedge it. Thus, not having that information is going to shut companies out of markets, may cause them to lose customers, and to prove that they are compliant takes a lot of operational effort. So where Minehub comes in is helping companies to evidence that's compliance, and do it in an automatic way.
Yeah. China is obviously a huge hub in the global economy and commodities processing. And you did mention, you did refer to China beforehand. Talk about your position in there. Is there a national champion that you're maybe battling against, that China wants to set their own standard or anything, or how is your adoption and market penetration working in China?
I think we're quite unique as a startup in the sense that from the beginning we've invested in being able to conduct business in China and work with state-owned enterprises. I would like to apologies. I wouldn't say that we're battling with our own standards. In fact, we are more collaborating with emerging standards that are coming in China and seeing how we can complement the standards and incorporate the standards that are being set in China. One thing that's clear for us is that if you want to have a global solution for mining and metal supply chains, and you can't work with Chinese customers, you basically don't have a solution. And to work with Chinese customers, you need to be compliant with local regulations, need to be set up there. And that's exactly what we've been investing in. So we're running infrastructure in mainland China. We've got a very strong team. We're engaging with state-owned enterprises that can use the Minehub platform without the need to have a VPN. It's compliant with regulations. All those aspects are important.
You obviously raised, and we discussed this a bit, you raised your $2.5 million. You got on better terms than you originally thought. The fact that you could close in these markets is a nice win. What does that get you? How far does the $2.5 million go? You're still very much in growth development mode. And I guess with that is, in terms of revenues and so forth, offsetting costs, what does 2023 kind of look like? Is this where we start to see some real gain on revenues starting to traction up? And sorry, I threw a lot of questions into that.
No, that's fine. I think it's still, unfortunately, a bit too early to give any guidance on revenue. That's coming up. What we have done with our financing, though, is recognizing that the markets and our share price has been reflecting the markets, the conditions of the market. We also didn't raise an enormous amount of capital, so you'll see that back in our results that we that the financing will get us somewhere, but not to a break-even point, right? So you'll see us back in the markets at some point. What the numbers also show, though, is that we've been generating revenue, albeit very small, from the last 2 quarters, and we'll continue to do that over the next period. So that will and most likely increase. By how much, again, I prefer not to give guidance on that, but it is starting.
Enderon Capital. They were involved with this financing. Could you talk a little bit about them? I presume they're a little bit more than just a regular guy who wrote a check.
Yes, we're very pleased with to have such a strategic party now in our cap table. So somebody described to me the other day Arnoud Capital as being the smartest money in Europe. So if that money invested in MineHub, I couldn't agree less. I couldn't agree more than that statement, right? So, but they have it's an energy hedge fund with a thematic not just on the fossil fuel side, but also particularly the climate and energy transition, which is powered by metals. Hence the interest to not just invest in the metals themselves, but also in the picks and shovels like MineHub that facilitate the information flow of that energy transition.
All right, that's an impressive add-on to your cap table there. At what point, I know you're not giving guidance on revenues, and you're playing a big chess game. You're trying to get all sorts of pieces into place, and then things can really kind of take off. What are the major other elements you need to get into place for, like, let's say, revenue traction to really kick in, or to really solidify your position in the market, or how far away are you from that?
In a way, it's continuing what we're doing. I mean, we've basically figured that in copper we are making strong inroads, and we'll continue to invest significant part of our time in building up the pipeline there, the customer pipeline. The revenue is just a matter of time, right? So the way we look at our business model is the most important thing is to get what we call metric tons on platform. It's not necessarily about the number of customers. It's particularly about the number of metric tons that customers produce or consume, that they are being tracked through the MineHub platform. Then, based on that, we see revenues coming out on the back of that, as some of our pricing is based on the volumetric usage. So where we are is that our first wave of adoption is really with some of the biggest companies in the market. What we've seen, what is important, that we're not just focused on our customers and our customers, but that we see some ripple effect play out, where our customers start asking also their suppliers to run a pilots or engage with MineHub, right, as the future standard. And that's exactly the fact that we're seeing starting to see play out. So it will start small, but it will grow, and at some point it will grow quite quickly, just because of the volumes come on board. So it's not that we're doing 1 metric ton and then 2 metric tons. We're looking at migrating entire contracts onto the platform, like 100,000 tons per annum or 200,000 tons. So that way we can start growing in jumps. Now, I've been talking a lot about copper, but we are also looking at other metals like iron ore, metallurgical coal, nickel is coming into play. So all those markets are also becoming part of our activities in 2023.
All right. I'm curious, is gold a part of your kind of strategic plan? Obviously, there's gold in a lot of the copper concentrates and so forth, but it's not such an industrial metal. It's its own beast to its own. Is that going to end up being a focus for you, or does that have its own kind of pathway?
I think ultimately gold will be able to use the same platform as MineHub has developed, because a lot of the tools are very similar. But we are very focused on industrial supply chains on the big volumes, because we believe that that's where the network effects are. This is where we can get the critical mass, which is very important for our strategy to achieve that. And it sounds disrespectful. Gold is definitely not a byproduct, but it's something where we believe that if we have a good solution for copper concentrate, we have a good solution for gold concentrate, and we've got a good solution for refined metals, then clearly we will have a good solution for gold.
All right. Is there anything we missed or anything else you want to highlight before we wrap up this business update?
No, I think good questions, Martin. I think it all shows how we're making progress. We're executing on our plans. We are delivering on our plans. This year, 2023, is really around ramping up volumes and connecting ecosystem parties like the labs, but also the big software vendors to continuously increase our improve the value of our platform to our users.
All right. Arnoud, thank you very much for joining us and giving this update. That was really good. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. You're welcome.